Welcome back. Today we are going to have a chat about possibly the most important thing that Games Workshop showed off on Warhammer Day when they did their live preview and gave us a bunch of new reveals and literally nothing for 40k outside of Battle Force boxes, but we kind of expected that. However, at the end of the stream they showed something important, which is this little image right here. Now of course this confirms that the Emperor's Children are on their way back, and frankly that's pretty exciting news, but there's a lot to talk about in terms of what we might expect from that particular release and how Games Workshop can avoid messing it up. Before we get into it though, this video is brought to you by FlexiSpot and the C7 ergonomic chair, and this is not the C7. This is my old chair which is literally falling apart and offers, if anything, negative support, which has not been great for my back. The fact that it fairly consistently feels like it's about to just give way or tip me onto the floor at random probably hasn't been helping me either. This, however, is the C7, and to say it's an upgrade is a huge understatement. And while you can see that just from looking at it, it goes a little bit deeper than just appearance. For a start, it feels very well built and it's far more sturdy than my old chair no matter how I'm sitting, whether I'm recording, editing, or procrastinating, which definitely doesn't happen all the time. The sheer amount of customizability on offer from the C7 is ridiculous. It's great. You can adjust the seat depth and tilt, the lumbar support, the angle of the backrest, the height of the armrests, plus the angle that they sit at, and on top of all of that, there's an optional footrest that can be used for reclining, or more often in my case, sitting with your legs crossed. Mine has the mesh finish, which is perfect for me because I overheat easily, and it is super comfortable. You can literally bounce things off this. The C7 comes with either mesh or foam seat material, an optional footrest, and 4 frame and surface colour combinations. The C7 comes with a 30-day return policy for a risk-free trial, a 10-year warranty with direct replacement for damaged parts, and if you use my discount code C730, you can get $30 off a C7. It is the best time to get one. To check out the C7, use the link in the description or the pinned comment. Thank you once again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring the video. Now let's get back to it. Okay, it could be argued that it's maybe a bit early to start speculating on what we might see from the Emperor's Children stuff, but to be fair, we've got 3 other Legion-specific Chaos armies to kind of take cues from as to what we might expect. We've got the Death Guard, we've got the Thousand Suns, we've got the World Eaters. For my money, I think the Death Guard have got the better end of the deal overall, because their list to me, or at least their range, is a bit more rounded. They just seem to have a little bit more than the other 2, although Thousand Suns aren't that far off. They're just lacking things like specific vehicles, which the Death Guard do have. Of the 3 currently, World Eaters feels I was going to say the most lackluster, but I don't know whether that's entirely fair or whether that's something that just the word alone will make World Eaters players watching this go, yeah, no, that's pretty spot on. I guess that just depends on how much you wanted out of that range versus how much you actually got. For me, there's not really enough variety going on in that range, and there's a distinct lack of things that I would have liked to have seen. Things like Khorne-specific vehicles, for instance, that we just didn't get, which is a real pity. Emperor's Children are coming after all 3 of those Legion-specific Chaos armies, which kind of makes you wonder, are we going to get something more akin to Death Guard, where there is a quite rounded list complete with vehicles and various types of infantry, or are we getting the World Eaters treatment, where we get a few kits that build a few different things, and that's about it? I know which one I prefer. I think it's fair to assume that we will see a new Lucius the Eternal. The model itself, which is no longer available, funnily enough, it's currently old as hell, I think is the technical term, and definitely does not quite match the current aesthetic that Games Workshop goes for with their models, in that it's just kind of dated, the detail isn't quite there, but then this is older than some of the people who will be watching this video, so you can see why it's kind of fallen behind the times a bit. It's also totally reasonable to assume that we will get things like Noise Marines back. I mean, you can still make some if you really want to. The Noise Marine sonic weapons are still available, but oh dear lord, they are getting on a bit, aren't they? Funnily enough, I think these are about the same age as Lucius, which would make sense. But they are definitely not up to par when you compare them to the Chaos Space Marine kit you're supposed to put them with. I mean, good grief. The difference in overall detail and sharpness is unreal. It would be insane not to see new Noise Marines. I mean, that's like half the basis of what makes the Emperor's Children cool to so many people, is the fact that they have this insane, cool sonic weaponry. There's a reason why so many people rushed out to buy the Forge World ones for Horus Heresy, despite the fact that they are far more expensive than just kit bashing your own. That being said, I don't think we need to worry too much about every Noise Marine looking like this. This is a fun throwback, this is a fun one-off model, and I'm sure pretty much everyone's going to have one of these in their army, but a full squad exactly like this doesn't really fit with what 40k is today. And given that the current Noise Marine guns are so distinctive, this would be a weird departure and a strange focus for them to take on something that's already got quite an established style. That being said, if they did a whole pack of just those helmets, I would 100% be in for that. I would buy that. It looks incredible. It's fantastic. It's very Emperor's Children, but you don't have to have the flares, the high-heeled boots on your power armor, and just a full-on guitar. You don't need all of that. But the helmet does work. The helmet would work really well. Obviously, whether or not you kept the zebra print on the helmet, that's totally up to you. It depends on how you want to paint it. Personally, I wouldn't go for that, but that's only because it looks like an absolute faff to do. Now, talking of Noise Marines, this is where things get super interesting for me, because I have to wonder how they're going to approach certain things. Because with the Horus Heresy game, with the Horus Heresy models, we already have examples of Noise Marines. Granted, they're not as spiky as your traditional Chaos Space Marines, but they look good. These really are very good models. And they are ostensibly the same thing in Horus Heresy as they are in 40k. Granted, by 40k times, you might be getting a bit more wild with how many spikes and bits of other people's skin are hanging off you, but generally speaking, the overall makeup is the same. The weapons being used are pretty much the same. And when it comes to how do you do these in 40k so that they have the same kind of impact, the same rough styling, the same rough weapons, but make them that different that they are demonstrably not Horus Heresy, that's where I think we're going to start to see some interesting shifts and changes, right? Of course, colour scheme does a lot of heavy lifting, but at the end of the day, these are Noise Marines. They might have a fancy name, but that's basically what they are. Just sticking spikes on these isn't going to be enough to fully differentiate them, and you know full well that Games Workshop is going to try and keep them as separate as possible. Something else to think about and consider as well is Fulgrim. So, when you look at the Death Guard, when you look at World Eaters, when you look at Thousand Suns, they each have their respective Demon Primarch with them. So it's reasonable to assume that we're going to see the same thing from the Emperor's Children, right? It would be a bit mad if they came back and of the 4, named legions, they, for whatever reason, just didn't get their Primarch. That wouldn't go down very well at all. But in a similar case to the Noise Marines, we already have quite a good Demon Primarch Fulgrim model right here. On the one hand, they may well say, okay, go away and buy the Horus Heresy one, but that seems incredibly unlikely because they want to keep those as separate as possible. At the same time, there is a very definite benchmark right here for what Fulgrim should look like. More modern descriptions of him aren't that different to what we see here, and of course, there is the very serious issue of the fact that this one is resin, and they are not going to want to push a resin Primarch as part of a big 40k release. Demon Primarch Fulgrim for Warhammer 40k needs to effectively be kind of this, but different enough to be distinguishable, but not so different that he doesn't look like what he's looked like before. And what makes this especially interesting to me is this is the first time that this has happened. Yes, we do have Angron, we do have Mortarion, we do have Magnus, all as resin Horus Heresy models, but we don't have demon versions of them for the Horus Heresy. We just have them as they were before they were corrupted by Chaos, or partway through being corrupted by Chaos, but they aren't demonstrably chaosified. We don't have giganto wings, we don't have forearms, all of that stuff. We've already got normal Fulgrim and Demon Primarch Fulgrim before getting a 40k version of the second version of him, and somehow he needs to be different and the same. I can't wait to see what they do with this, because it feels like a very, very tight rope to have to walk, you know? It does feel like with certain core elements of the Emperor's Children, specifically the Noise Marines and Fulgrim himself, we are in an interesting position where they kind of already have units that are recognisable as existing right now, as being a thing, but they're for the wrong system and in the wrong material. So they've got to try and somehow update them whilst retaining original personality, whilst them not being confused with the things that already exist. They could just go completely left field and abandon Noise Marines, but that seems incredibly unlikely, and I think would also put a lot of people off. But it's also, I think this is the first time they've had to deal with that. It's going to be super interesting to see how they tackle those core elements. Plus, there's got to be more, right? We can't just have Emperor's Children being Noise Marines and Fulgrim and that's it. There are way more openings for other unique specific units. Are they going to focus on some sort of fast attack choice? Are we going to get to see the Phoenix Terminators come back maybe? I mean, it would be cool to see a Chaos version of these, especially if they stuck with this mark of armour and just chaosed them up a bit. Well, I say chaos them up a bit, I don't want generic chaos, obviously I want something specific to the Emperor's Children. I want to see speakers and stuff. That would be a really fun way of bringing this unit back. Now, I've also got the question of what are their equivalents of, like, the Jackals, the Zangors, the Plague Zombies. What's their equivalent going to be? Are they going to go Mortal Followers? Are they going to go for Slangors? I mean, they're a thing. Do they want to directly copy something that's in Thousand Suns anyway? I mean, they may well do, because we already have the Slangor Fiendbloods in Age of Sigmar. In fact, Age of Sigmar, you've got a mix of mortals and demons. The Hedonites of Slaanesh is a hybrid force between those two, so you have got things like the Slangor Fiendbloods, which look fantastic by the way, and you've got the human followers like the Lord of Hubris. I'll say right now, I wouldn't mind if they took some of the styling from AOS and applied it to some of the stuff for 40k. Some of those like rounded edges and kind of carved sections of armour, they look really good, and depending on how they're implemented, they could do some really nice work on like power armour and stuff. Not the whole thing, I don't want the whole thing covered in it, but just here and there, I don't know, it could look pretty cool. In fact, there's a few things that I wouldn't mind if they borrowed from AOS. I don't know that we'll be able to just field fiends, but if you could, that would be really good. Taking a few design cues from how androgynous and weird they are. I mean, look, that's just altogether too many legs in a not good configuration, alright? It'd be good to see some really uncanny, unnatural creatures around. Another thing is that the AOS range has done a good job of showing that Excess is not just all about, well, all about just sex and stuff, because it's not. Slaanesh is the god of excess. Excess can apply to a load of different things, including gluttony. Now, while I don't expect to see any marble chariots covered in people holding plates of food in a 40k army, although I guess you could if you wanted to, it would be nice to see some of the other elements of excess portrayed in the Emperor's Children releases. I'm sure you'd probably have to work pretty hard to become a, like, obese space marine, but hey, they worship Slaanesh. They're all about the excess. If anyone can manage it, I'm sure one of the Emperor's Children could. You've also got other elements like vanity that have showed up in the AOS range that, again, it would be nice to see some sort of nod to. And when I give these examples, by the way, like I say, I'm not asking for this model, but in 40k wholesale. Just similar thoughts, similar ideas, similar representations of what excess is, as opposed to just being the traditional, what people always think it is, you know? Something I'd absolutely love to see is a bit of body horror. Bit of body horror would be fantastic. I mean, this is still one of the best Slaanesh-based models they've done. Just full stop. Point blank. It's horrific. It's awful. It's brilliant. This is the kind of nightmarish stuff that 40k, it's the bread and butter. It's the basis. It's a core part of what makes that universe that universe. If we could have a little bit of this in there, oh, I'd be happy. I'd be well happy. Weirdly, when it comes to the Emperor's Children, I'm not entirely sure what it is that I want. I just want it to do them justice. I don't think there's a definitive list of, I want this unit, I want this kit, I want this variety of stuff. I just want it to be faithful to what the Emperor's Children are. This, for me, feels like quite a high-stakes release. It feels like something that has been built up to for a long time. It's something that I'm actively looking forward to, and there's been a few things over the years where I've kind of got myself quite excited to see what happens next when it comes to Games Workshop releases. This is a big one. This is a really big one. If this one is not great. I don't know how well I'm going to deal with the disappointment. Probably not that well, to be honest. With that said, I turn it over to you. What do you reckon? What are you looking forward to? What do you hope that they do? What do you really hope that they don't do? And do you have as much riding on this as I do? Have you allowed yourself to sort of become a bit swept up? A bit, like, actually a little bit, tiny bit, maybe feeling the hype just a little bit? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, do go and check out the C7 from FlexiSpot. There is a link in the description and in the pinned comment down below. Thank you very much to FlexiSpot for sponsoring the video. Thank you for watching it, and I will see you for the next one.